Welcome back. Should the city of Sarasota ban the practice known as reparative therapy? The city commission is considering an ordinance making that illegal. The practice known as conversion therapy is controversial to say the least. Tampa adopted an ordinance last year banning it. Now some are concerned practitioners are leaving Tampa and could set up shop here in Sarasota. Joining us for more is Suzanne Atwell. You may know her as a former city commissioner. She is also a licensed therapist, and also Nathan Brummer, who is from Also Youth. And joining us from Dallas is David Pickup, a licensed family therapist who also practices conversion therapy. And David, let me start with you, because if you heard Erica's story there, the American Psychological Association supports the idea that this kind of therapy could be damaging to youngsters, and I want to get your response to that.
Conversion therapy is damaging. I don't do conversion therapy. That's the big news here. I don't know where, well, I do know where the term was gotten from. It's gotten from LGBT activists around the state that are forcing their agenda onto therapists and children and adults and politicians. That term, conversion therapy, which is offensive to my colleagues and my clients, it connotates some kind of pray away the gay, religious boot camps, shaming experiences. They tend to say that we hook up people to electrodes and shock them and do electroshock therapy, aversion techniques, which are all horrible. Reparative therapy is all about authenticity, resolving the causes for people who know that their homosexual feelings are not genetic, not naturally inborn, that are caused by trauma in childhood, some of which is sexual abuse. And what Sarasota is saying is that a child who has been sexually abused, a heterosexual child that comes into my office, they say it's illegal to alter sexual feelings that have, for any reason, which includes sexual abuse. It's quite amazing.
All right, Suzanne, you are also a licensed therapist, although we know you here on the Suncoast as a former city commissioner. Respond to what David said in terms of, if you heard him in Erica's story, there is no gay gene, that this is basically heterosexual children who, because of trauma in their youth, are now gay.
No, and I with all the experience and all the information, and I mean, there is a plethora, and I could name every medical and psychological association that would debunk all those ideas. When I was a therapist many years ago in the community, I had clients that would come to me to talk about issues of sexuality, and my job as a licensed therapist, I am licensed, I am regulated, and my job is to make sure that I work with the youth and get their authentic self. And this, to me, flies in the face of that. Kids today need to look to the therapist to get their authentic self. And I use that word very liberally, authentic self, because if you start excising out of that, changing that, you're going to have a multitude of problems.
Nathan, let me ask you this, and some people who are watching this right now might ask, is this an issue that is looking for a solution where there is not a problem right now in Sarasota, since there are no therapists who currently practice it?
So, valid question. The history that your other guest sort of alluded to is a part of the history of reparative therapy or conversion therapy. Just because you dress it up, it has still got a long history.
There's a real difference between conversion and reparative therapy.
And I understand that. It's a bit of a convoluting of what we're talking about, I think. If you've got a trauma issue, that's a valid issue to be dealt with in a therapeutic environment. If you have an identity that requires therapy, then you honor that as well. None of the major organizations nationally support this, whether you call it conversion therapy or reparative therapy. Most Floridians don't want it. Based on a 2017 poll, 71% of Floridians don't want something like this. It's harmful and it's ineffective.
Okay. Well, we are obviously just scratching the surface here. We are just getting warmed up, and we'll have much more on conversion therapy in a moment. Welcome back. We're talking about the effort in Sarasota to ban so-called conversion therapy. And joining us for more is Suzanne Atwell. You may know her as a former city commissioner, but she is also a licensed therapist. And joining us by Skype from Dallas is David Pickup, a licensed family therapist who practices restorative therapy, and also Nathan Brummer of Also Youth. And David, let me start with you again, because we have two therapists here with two different points of view. and she would like to know exactly what do you do in terms of talk therapy, and how do you measure the results?
The client is always in the driver's seat. When someone comes in through decades-old, long-accepted psychodynamic interventions, the client determines that because of trauma, whatever kind of trauma that was, that's the origin of their homosexual feeling. And on that basis, it fits perfectly the theory of psychodynamic theory, which resolves causes of what our issues are, and the symptoms, in a sense, I wouldn't use that word necessarily, but in a sense, the symptoms disappear. And that's exactly what happens in reparative therapy. In reparative therapy, these people are treated with compassion, love, understanding. For the few people I have that are gay identified clients, one would think I would force them and shame them into being heterosexual. And that's conversion therapy, which is completely ridiculous. That's not what professional licensed therapists do. In fact, I'm shocked to know, I'm glad to know actually, that Ms. Atwell recited her own view of therapy, and what she cited is exactly what happens in reparative therapy. Reparative therapy is not for people who are gay identified. Okay, it's for people whose homosexual feelings have been brought on.
Let me try to ask you, are you saying that anyone who is gay suffered some kind of trauma as a youth or a child?
I'm not saying, I didn't say that. Now, it is my personal belief that every single one of my clients have exactly presented with that situation. So yeah, every single one of my colleagues, clients, and my clients the world over that's exactly what we found out. But the client is in the driver's seat. And so to not offer therapy, in other words, this becomes the main question at this point, or at least one of them. Does a child or an adult have the right to participate in professional licensed therapy that they report actually works for them? You have to ask that question.
Yeah, but there's a lot there. But first, let me ask you this, Nathan. Number one, in your experience, and you work with youngsters who are gay and lesbian, do each one of them have a trauma as a youth that is responsible for them being gay or bisexual?
Right. So, of course not. So whether or not you're talking about the youth that we serve here in the Suncoast, or we're talking about Americans across the country, hundreds of thousands of Americans have been subjected to conversion therapy. We know those statistics, and we also know that it's ineffective and it's harmful. You see poor outcomes as a result, the worst of which is suicidality and suicides. And we know there are local therapists that are treating are young people who have been through conversion therapy and are needing additional therapy because of poor outcomes.
Suzanne, let me ask you this question. Is there a difference in your opinion, and I believe this ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, only deals with minors in terms of banning it in Sarasota, you know, for anybody who is under the legal age. That's not to say that an adult, woman or man, may choose to have this kind of therapy because they don't want to live that lifestyle. Right.
No, what we need to look at here, at the very least, we need to look at minors, and this is why we're doing this ordinance right now, and I hope it does pass. That's the very least. I know other states are working on it for adults, but we have to start with our most vulnerable. The clients that I saw, the youth, when you think about that age, the most vulnerable, when they start addressing issues of human sexuality, that's the dangerous time that they're susceptible to a lot of this, I call it bunk. I do. I think it's egregious, some of the methods that they're using that will, and he can say, well, the clients have the say. I mean, I just think that's skirting around the issue that you're saying, well, the client sitting there, they're in control of it.
David,
no.
let me ask you that same question they asked Suzanne, because as I said, an adult can make a decision about whether or not they want to take part in this therapy, seek it out in some cases, but a child doesn't have that option. If a parent takes them there, whether or not the child is seeking it.
That happens occasionally in my office. And so Sarasota needs to know that licensed professional ethical therapists always tell parents, we do not force children to change. The LGBT activists in Sarasota want you to believe something different. We show them love and acceptance. And if they believe they're born gay, we bless them on their way. But for those people who, because of trauma, experience homosexual feelings, the city of Sarasota is actually about to say it's illegal to give a child psychotherapy to resolve homosexual issues brought on by sexual abuse. Do you know what it feels like to be sexually abused by a budding young pedophile? I do. When I was 5 years of age, these were exactly my issues. Make a long story short, I went through authentic, licensed, professional, and reparative therapy, and it helped save my life. So Sarasota is not getting all the information it needs. It's being lied to by the LGBT activists who are focusing on.
So let me put that to you, Nathan. I mean, I'm sure you deal with all sorts of youngsters at also youth. Are there youngsters who are there who wish they could? They're dealing with a lot of issues. Could they also be wondering to themselves or asking or talking about that they really don't want to live this lifestyle, that they're trying to cope and they're trying to find answers?
I wish I could answer your question, but based on our services being confidential, I can't. But one of the things I need to point out very clearly, first of all, the ordinance hasn't been drafted, so what he is alleging, we know is not going to happen. And as passionate as he is and as personal as his call to action is, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Counseling Association, the American Psychoanalytic Association, and the National Association of School Psychologists all disagree with your guest.
Right. So but is there a difference here in terms of what David is saying and describing as reparative therapy here and conversion therapy, which has been derided for many years now?
Well, you know, it's interesting. We listed the associations, even the World Psychiatric Association, and Freud also, who I learned under the thumb of Freud. Any therapist reads a lot about that. Even he thought that homosexuality was nothing more than a normal variation on human sexuality, and that's what I think is kind of the norm, that if you turn it into something else, you're going to want to convert it. You're going to want to excise it. You want to, and in some cases, some people exorcise it. But even back in the day, way back in the day, when homosexuality was questioned, even Freud, with a patient, said, a mother brought a son to him and said, "Would you please cure my son of homosexuality?" He said, "My dear, you know, just a normal variation of human sexuality, and it will be kind of difficult." It's really interesting to see. And I want to raise one more point that David said about what he went through. Oftentimes, there are a lot of therapists out there or people that are involved in groups that they're not objective. A lot of people have experience, they've gone through it, so that they will lead groups because they have been through it.
David, this is not something that Sarasota is doing in a vacuum here. Tampa just approved a similar ordinance in the last year, and as we said at the outset, a lot of counties and cities and towns in Florida are doing the same. Respond for a second, and we only have less than a minute left, that all these professional organizations seem to be saying that there is no merit to what you call reparative therapy.
And yet, Alan, you notice that the one largest psychological association in the entire world, they left out, the American Psychological Association. Their 2014 APA handbook says sexual feelings can sometimes change. They also said in their latest task force report that they're on page 82 and 83 of their conclusions, that there is no proof of harm of sexual orientation change efforts. They're not quoting all the research. These people are cherry picking research to the detriment of children. And can you imagine a minor child, let's say 17 years old, he's got feelings of pedophilia, and he walks into a therapist's office in Sarasota, and that therapist has to tell him, "I'm sorry, it's illegal for me to help you reduce or eliminate your homosexual feelings in this version of homosexual feelings, which is called
Unfortunately, David, we're going to have to let it go right there. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Obviously, this is a very important conversation, and we should continue it here in Sarasota. But before we go, we want to hear what some of you had to say about last night's show on red light cameras and license plate readers. License plate readers aren't just to catch you running red lights. They can also be used in criminal investigations. There is a key element, catching the man charged with a double murder last year in Longboat Key, but the city of Sarasota has vetoed or voted not to add license plate readers to its systems, and we went to Facebook to hear your thoughts. Jennifer says red light cameras are one thing, the rest of them, that's a little bit creepy. And Mary says, how is it an invasion of privacy? You are driving on public streets. As for other cameras, I have served as a juror. Those cameras solve cases that otherwise would have been let criminals run free. And Robin says, the ignorance scares me when people believe that only those doing illegal stuff can get caught up in our justice system. If you'd like like to join the conversation about last night's or tonight's topic, just join us on Facebook, and you could leave a comment at facebook.com/mysuncoast.com.abc7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions. They're on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And for the latest on local breaking news, don't forget to download the updated version of our app. If your current app doesn't work, it's expired, just go to the App Store and re-download it by searching for WWSB or My Suncoast. We want to thank all our guests for being here tonight. Former City Commissioner Nathan and Suzanne Atwell, Nathan Bremer from Also Youth, and joining us by Skype, David Pickup, a licensed family physician in Dallas area.